just a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions or want to explore a topic, please use the Q&A section. If there's an immediate question, Ryan will chime in. Otherwise, we'll address as many as we can at the end of this learning session. So I hope everyone's doing well. In New Hampshire, we are experiencing some surprise snowfall, and talking to some people in our Colorado office, they got about 9 inches of snow this morning. So crazy times that we're experiencing. But I'm going to dive right in. The purpose is going through an area of the software. I've done a session like this in the past at some of our user conferences. But really, as you are running with the system and changing how you do business, there's a core piece of the software that can allow you to set rules on the system, reminders to users of the software, and restrict data so it's in a uniform fashion. What I'll step through are just a few areas. Please know that you can use this and make changes in the data dictionary and always revert back and back those changes out. I do recommend any change, test it first in the practice company, because some changes will immediately impact and put restrictions on certain users. And in some areas, if you make, and I'll talk about this a bit more, make certain fields required, which were previously not required, and data is missing, just make sure those are on some of the custom forms so users have the opportunity to fill that in if they're updating and saving the record. So I'm on my main Counterpoint screen here with my recently used. You can see I've been busy in these areas of the software. And diving into where I go to get the data dictionary, I can go to my search function, or I can go into setup system configuration data dictionary. There are a few dictionaries. The ones that we're going to touch on are the data dictionary and Zoom dictionary. The text dictionary is also very powerful, as this will allow you to change some of the messaging in the system. So let's say you have a warning that comes up that says, customer has orders on file, would you like to process? You could add to that and give your employees some more information saying, if you have any questions, call this number. Could be a message that you add in the text dictionary. Okay. In the data dictionary, there are a couple of different ways. I'll start within. There's two components, the system data dictionary and the data dictionary. The data dictionary contains all of the changes that you've made. So if I go in and adjust a field, again, I will come back and do some more here. And let's say I want to change my account code and set a default value. If for some reason I don't want that change, if I delete, it's not deleting the field as a system, it's just deleting this entry that I've made into the custom data dictionary. Again, the system is going to be all the defaults that are sent with the system, the defaults that are your required fields, default values, labels on fields would all be part of that system. You also have the ability to turn this on and off by user. So if there is a mistake, I can go into my user security settings. And enable customizations. If I turn that off, it will revert back to the system dictionary and remove some of those settings. Okay. So these are just all tips and tricks that I've learned mainly by mistakes that I've made. But I want to share those with you so you can get to these changes faster than I did when I've made these mistakes. So back on my data dictionary. So everything that I see here, I've brought over and customized. There's a couple different components that you'll see here. The first are all the tables. So in Counterpoint, you have your series of tables. Within tables, you have columns, and within those tables and columns, you have indexes. If I click my drop down, I can see my listing of all the different types of tables. And what you would have here is AI would be for accounting interface. AR is everything doing with customers. DB would be database. DM is a data mart used for aggregated data. I'm going to skip over to IM is going to be all of your inventory tables. So your IM item would be your item card records. IM inventory would be inventory. What you're going to see here are all the database table and field names. Okay. So if I go into IM, I'm going to see everything database related. I can do a search if I click in here, if I'm looking for a certain table or field and find that one. As you use this more and more, you'll get used to the naming conventions, but right after here, I'll show you how you get to what they actually mean. So if I am in my IM table, I have my description, which is the item table. It's set to fast open. I have a standard add on the fly, and then I have my different columns listed here for additional description, cubes, and so on. Okay. You'll see when I first pop in here, column codes. Column codes are universal fields throughout the system. Okay. So an example of that might be a profile field that could be used in multiple areas. And I can make edits to column codes in this data dictionary, or I can make edits into basically a quick setup that's part of the system. So this is very helpful if I'm going in and let's say I want to turn on some profile fields. So if I'm looking at my item table, sorry, I'm working with two screens here, so I'll be dragging back and forth. I have my item table and my series of items. Okay. If I want to turn on or relabel, let's say item attribute, and maybe call it season, I can do that in the data dictionary. If I do it in the item table and change item attribute 1, it's just going to change it here, okay, in this table. If I change it in a column code, it will change it throughout the software wherever I see item attribute. Okay, so if that's pulled up into a report, in a report label, if I'm seeing that in, let's say, point of sale or any type of lookup, that might be outside of just the item table. Okay, so that's where a column code would come in at, spreads across the whole system. And Counterpoint has deployed a quick way to make those changes to column codes. And that would be through the quick setup. Okay, so you can search for that through the search bar. Otherwise, it's under setup system, quick setup. Trying to jog my memory. On this items tab, I have different profile codes. So I'm going to have items, customers, and purchasing, which relates to vendors, and purchase orders for miscellaneous charges. Point of sale has a series. These can either be pulled up ticket by ticket or prompted for each ticket. And then my credit card setup. A good use that I've seen with point of sale, I'll call out the Patriots. If you go and visit the Patriots and shop in their retail store on non-game days, they'll ask you if you visited the Hall of Fame. It's just an area that they're doing to capture and and do some conversion rates on who goes and visits the Hall of Fame and comes through the store. I changed one here. I made a create date, but I made reference to my item attribute. Maybe I want to change this to the season of products. Okay. I can add the display label in here under my quick setup. I say OK. I go back to my items, and now season is part of my new label. In the database, it's still the same. It's just displaying it to you a little different. Okay. But let's say I want to make that always required, and I can't really think of how to find that. As we looked at the data dictionary, we saw that it's all in the database language. Well, there's a quick way that I can switch from label names and fields to actual database fields. So if I right click on any title bar, I'm showing this in items, but it's in customers, it's in different transaction tables. If I right click, I can go to labels as field names, control names, and it will tell me the database name of all of those fields, okay, and tables. So this is the IM item table as shown in the top left-hand corner. And then looking at my fields, my price field is PRC_1. And as you know, with using Counterpoint, anything that's in a different color in my database in green, and that's kind of newer releases, that will be a required field. Okay. If I go to my description tab and look at my season, or now my attribute code 1, that's going to be the field that I may want to change in the database. Our data dictionary. So let's look at the data dictionary now, and with that change to quick setup, what did it do? So I go back into my data dictionary. I now have changed my attribute code to be season. It's going to be a column code in the system. Okay. But then I can manipulate it and add more conditions in the table itself of IM item. Okay. So if I go into add a new, and I want to scroll, or I can type in to go to my attribute code 1. And now I may do some other things. So let's say I am making this a season field, but I want to make it part of my keyword search. So when I'm typing into my item lookup, I type in winter, I want it to show up, and I want that attribute code to be part of those keyword searches. So it's a very simple change from attribute code 1. I can go over to keyword, and I can make keyword yes. This will now be part of my standard item lookup keyword search throughout the database. Okay. Other fields that are available, I can make this a required field. Okay. So now whenever I add product, or if I'm changing an existing item, it's always going to force me to make an entry into that season field. If I make it required, some other use cases might be, now I don't want anyone to, or I want authorized users to make the change, okay? I can make this a protected field in the system. So only individuals that have the ability to unlock fields in their security settings can unlock it and make a change if that's needed. It's just another way of protecting your data integrity in the system. You can make some fields visible or invisible, and this is through this flag, and I'll show you one of these examples. So if I'm scrolling over and looking at my profile date here for an item, another change I made was I set in Counterpoint, the system will always record last maintained date and user, first sale date, first received date, last sale date, last received date by location. What it doesn't do automatically is record when the item is created. Okay. Some people use the status date field as that, but that can change. So your status may go from active to discontinued, and your status date field, you may want to reflect that. Here, I want to set a certain field called create date. Then I can use a unique field or a value for default value. So whenever I add a new product, it's going to immediately default my value to T. Now, one of the quick shortcut keys in the Counterpoint system and the help files and documentation has a whole list of these, but T in any date field will put in today's date. So if I set that value of T, and whenever I create a record, it's going to record this in the system. Okay. Now I want to make sure that that's a true value every time I add a record. So I'm going to use this copy from. So if you're used to, in creating items, to copy from a previous item, I want to make sure I copy values, but not this value. I want this to be represent the time and date that I'm adding the item. And I'll show you an example of this after we get out of here. Skipping would be through tab entry. So if you just want to skip over it, skip as default, allow asterisks in the field, visible or not visible. So I can make this a default value, but I could just hide it. And it's just saved in the database, so I always have it. If you want to make it visible, you can leave it here. A cost field, this doesn't change basically the accounting, or it doesn't necessarily need to be an actual cost from vendor field or a last average or standard cost field. What this cost field does is allow you to interact with security settings. So in security settings, you can allow people to view cost or not, allow people to view and change cost. Okay. So if you make a field, a cost field, yes, what this will do is it will respect those security rules. So let's say I'm a manager, I log in, I should be able to view costs, right? Maybe not change, but view, or maybe assistant manager. Go in, view, but not change. This allows me to see those values, but not change those values. If a manager or a system admin comes in and they're allowed to view and change cost, that allows me not only to view, but change the values in those fields. Okay, now I'll just leave that on for now. Hard doing this over the web, still used to get working from home. Usually at this point, I ask if there are any questions, if this is making sense and following along. I'm going to assume yes right now, unless I see things started to pop up in the QA. All right, so I'm going to save and refresh, close out of this screen, and now see what we did here in the item record. So I'm going to scroll over, I'm going to select an item. I'll now see on my description, I made that a required field. This had previous values, but let's say winter is one of the attributes that I'm adding in. Okay, and save. Now, when I do a lookup, it's going to respect winter in my keywords. Oops, sorry. Winter as part of my keyword search. Before, it was never part of that actual item record. It's not in the description. It's not in, well, any of the descriptions. But since I made season part of the keyword search, I can now search for that. And this holds true throughout the system. So you may be seeing this here in items, but this may be jogging your brain to think of, man, there are other fields for customers that I want to be part of this search. So let's look at customers next and see what we can do. But before I leave here, I don't want to forget my date field. So I'm going to auto assign and create a new item for a second here. And I'm going to copy this standard item. So I've made it so my season copies over as part of that copy from. That's actually a default. But if I go over to my profiles, I didn't want my create date to copy over from my previous item. It's defaulting to hopefully today's date of 4/16/2020. Okay. Since I can view and edit costs, I'm able to edit this field afterwards. If my security settings were different, I would not be able to manipulate that. Okay, and I've exceeded the items I can add to this database. Okay, so now let's look at customers. I'm going to go through the same properties, but I want to change a different field. Okay, so now in this, what we're going through, I want to capture basically as much information about my customers, but I've noticed that everyone's typing in phone number different or zip code a little different, and I want to make sure that it's the same. So if I'm doing a call campaign or a text campaign, I want to make sure that there are values entered in appropriately for these fields. Okay, so I may look at my customer table. I'm going to do the same thing. What table do I need to edit? I'm going to right click, labels as field names, control names. This is my ARCUS table. This is my phone number field that I want to change. And I'm going to go to my data dictionary and make that adjustment. Okay. And I already did that to save time. And what I want to do here is, whenever I add a new customer, I want this to be a required field. We're seeing that more and more on websites. We're seeing that in databases. I want to make sure that I capture that information. I then want to make it uniform. Okay. So the data dictionary does some other things besides just this main tab, which allows you to set different defaults. I could call this primary phone number. Okay. And then I can go to my other tab. This might set min and max values. That could probably doesn't really apply to a phone number, but when I get into some other fields, I've used this before to prevent barcodes from getting scanned into prompt for price fields. Okay, we had one customer that was becoming a problem, and we can control it through this min and max value. But I want to set a picture mask. Okay, and there are some certain rules around picture masks or some shortcuts that I will bring over to the screen. Okay, I can force numbers. Okay, so using this number sign in the picture mask will force a digit, letters with a question mark. Okay. I can convert letters to uppercase or lowercase. I can allow for any character to be used. Okay. And then I can set optional and sequential values. Okay. So you may have, or force values. I may have a requirement to only enter red, green, or blue into a field. Okay. This allows you to set, by using this picture mask, only the values I see here included in that field. Very good when you look at maybe some of the alpha profiles where they're free-form text, alphanumeric text fields, but I may want to force that, yeah, that's the purpose, but I only want red, green, or blue entered in there. Okay. And these are some samples. So these are found in the customizing Counterpoint PDF document, and different examples of how you can use these picture masks in your database. So let's go back and see it in action here. A question came in. Yes, we can include that in appendix and shortcuts, and I may have some other ones here that would be beneficial that I'll also include for you all. So this picture mask, I said it. I want my my phone number to follow a certain format. I'll save it, and now I'm going to go to customers. I'm going to add a new customer. My phone number field is now required. And as I type in, I don't have to put in those characters. I can put in my number and save that record. Okay, so it forces the entry. If I try and save this without matching that picture mask, it will give me a warning and force me to correct my my field before I can move on. Okay. And like any errors in the system, when this error message pops up, I double click, it will bring me to the error message again and the field to correct the value.
Kevin, is that retroactive? Will it fix any existing customers?
Yeah, stole the words out of my mouth. No, it will not fix those.
Okay.
What we've had, what I've seen done in that scenario, and this actually when I did the session last, same thing came up, and then we broke off and tested it. What you would do is you would export for customers, let's say in this specific field, you would export the customers out into Excel. You would update the phone number field to match that format and then import them back in. Okay. And note when you do that import, and whenever I talk about imports, I always make this certainly something that I point out is you are going to remove add new. You are going to update the record. The default is to replace records. We don't want to do that here. You're going to make it an update and an update to your records. Replace is going to replace that actual record. And if you only have certain values in the import file, it will not properly update, and it will actually replace those records with the new values that you're entering in. So always, I recommend going in, do an update records for the update mode. Okay. All right. So there are some other neat areas as we go into looking at customers, as maybe I want to change and edit the customer add on the fly form. So a customer add on the fly form, you have your full customer record here, and you have quick customers. This full record is going to give you all these tabs. Okay, but maybe when I'm in point of sale, I'm not going to go and fill out all of this stuff, right? That's just going to take too much time. I want a quick entry, just the key optional fields and all of my required fields that are not defaulted, and I want to move those in to the system. Okay, so what I may do is create a custom add on the fly form. And you can turn on, if you want to use add on the fly forms, and set up customer control. And that allows you to click the box, and then when in certain areas of the software, when you go to add, and I'll show you in point of sale, you can then just use the simplified form. Okay. So I go to my table, and here you have custom maintenance forms, custom view forms, add on the fly is what I was referencing, and standard form. So a custom maintenance form, this might be something that, and could be the same as your add on the fly form. I see sometimes where Outside of point of sale, you may want to give associates the ability to add customers, but you don't want to open up that full window. What you can do is create a custom maintenance form and just add it to their menu. And that's through the menu editor. So I create the form first, I add it to the menu, and then that would be the customer form that they would see and edit. Okay. A custom view form is simply that. I can view the records, but I can't edit the records. Okay. So this is another good thing to add to associates menus if they're outside of point of sale and for different reasons just need to view customer information. A custom view form is very good for that. And this is throughout the data. So I'm using customers as an example, but this could be for items, this could be for vendors, this could be for users within the system. All good things to end up using the maintenance forms and view forms. Okay. And then I have my custom add on the fly. Okay. So I can start from scratch, or I can go to my custom forms, and I'm going to pull first the standard system custom form. And I'm going to grab my custom add-on fly. Okay. And then I'm going to edit this one. If you're creating one from scratch, it's simply customer view. I just type in, and once I click edit, it's going to create that and save it to my company directory. Okay. I'm going to edit my simplified. Okay. Are you sure you want to adjust that one? Yep. And what I have here is this is where I can drag and drop the fields that I want to be part of that add on the fly form. So let's say I start with customer, then I go name, first name, I have my phone number. I can move and manipulate where those fields are. I may always want to add phone number 2, which I may have changed to mobile phone. Maybe I use this form for a lot of, I don't track my general commerce walk-in customers, but I have a wholesale division where I have terms. So I may want to add the terms codes, statement codes, and those fields to the system. Now, if I haven't gone through and I'm new to the data dictionary and custom maintenance forms, or I just want to see how this layout will look on the associate screens, employee screens, I can change this view and show labels. Okay, makes it easier to grab which fields you want and move those into the appropriate place. What you'll also see is a tab order. If I right click on here, I can have Counterpoint guess the tab order, which will simply just go in order of how I have these fields, or I can create my own tab order. Okay. So let's say I set my tab order and I want to start at the customer number, but my default customers are person, not business. So I want to go right to first name, then last name, and then I want to make sure I capture phone number. Those are my required fields. I may move this around as well, so you don't get so dizzy when you're tabbing around. But then if I tab next, I could go to my optional fields, my address, city, state, zip code. All right. Those are all different ways that you can set the tab order in the system and manipulate these fields. Once I hit save and save these changes, that's my new custom add on the fly form. If I need to change it, I can edit again. If I need to remove it, I just highlight it and delete it. Okay. All right, so those are some of the basics in data dictionary. Then there are some more complex and thinking of where in the database. So Counterpoint has a series of tables where when you hit save on a record, it will write that information to the database. Counterpoint also has some fields that are called virtual tables, okay? So virtual tables would be while the transaction is going on, I would then, it's saving it in memory, but not committing it to the database yet. A good example of that are point of sale transactions. So while the system is not saved to the database, it's sitting in a virtual table. And one example would be this document header or document line, okay? So in the database, PS doc header is everything in the header information, customer, bill to, stuff that's unique to the ticket. And then when I get to my document lines, that's going to be stuff that's the line items that I'm adding to the ticket. There are many more, but I'll just start here with those examples. Okay. So in my document header, many of you may be transforming your business, changing how you operate in this current landscape that we're in, and have shifted from cash and carry to maybe phone orders, or I heard from one customer, unfortunately, that was through all this pandemic, was also struck with a hurricane or a tornado, and it wiped out one of their stores, which also housed their e-commerce, right? So they're shifting gears and now are trying to fulfill orders from another store in different stations. So, you know, with everything going on, the last thing you want to streamline what you can. And one of the things that you can streamline is just how the database looks for orders in the system. So long story short, in what we go through, you can change the system to, let me go into touchscreen, and force click certain fields. So if I'm processing orders and my default day in and day out is just show me orders for my store, right? And only for the station that I'm operating on, you can, that's the default. But I can change that default, as I've already done in the data dictionary, to include other stores. So maybe I've processed everything into an e-commerce store, and typically I take those e-commerce orders and ship it out from that e-commerce store, but I've changed my business, and now I take those e-commerce orders in and I bring them curbside, right? I do a hold for pickup, and I have my my germ shields or countertop shields to protect me from my consumers, but they can still walk through and pick up that sealed bag. So those are different things. I could say, well, now I want to make sure that I include all orders that have come in, regardless of station and regardless of store, because I'm going to fulfill it all from this station here. So I can make those forced check marks by setting this under the virtual table, include other station orders and include other store orders. Okay. Setting the default value for yes would check the box. Setting the default value to no would uncheck the box. This is always also very common, and in a lot of early start configurations, holds might be set up where you want to hold the ticket on one station, but retrieve it from another. Include other station holds may be turned on, but maybe I don't want to turn on pulling up holds at other stores. Okay, so I can just set the default there. All right, so those are some of my early favorites with the data dictionary. And I do have some, we'll see what other documents we can share out with the follow-up emails that come from this. Okay. So in all honesty, I am learning and playing every day in, well, maybe not every day now, but as much as I can in the database. And there are some pieces that I'm still testing and trying. And one of the recent ones is using some custom constraints. Okay, I don't have this quite dialed in just yet, but I do want to show it. So I may have a need to allow my customer or allow my cashiers to sell to walk-in customers, right? But maybe I also have a wholesale business where those customers are AR customers, accounts receivable customers, and I don't want the cashiers to see those records. Okay, so I can set up a lookup constraint, which will force a filter. Okay, so I could force a filter to be only show values where if I'm a manager, I can see everything. But if I'm not a manager, I can see all except my AR customers, customer type AR. Okay. So how that looks when I go into POS and crossing fingers. Okay, I've now logged in as a generic POS user. So if I try and void a ticket, I can't. And also, if I try and look up customers through my enter screen, I can now only see cash type customers. I can't see any of my AR customers. It's forced that filter into the system. Okay. So how I was able to do that in this ticket header is using some of the macros in the system. Again, similar to picture mask, there are some embedded macros. That some of these, so this would say, give me the user that's logged in. We use this in some of our development that we do where we can pass or pull specific values based off of who's logged into the system or what store, location, or work group. Okay. But this is how I can set up this constraint. Okay. If I go back and now log back in under my manager user with my manager security code, I go back to customers. And see all of my customers now. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm here. This is a good time to show another area that I wanted to get to, and that's dealing with the zooms in the system. Really what I'm showing you is basically just feedback from either training sessions that I've done, conversations that I've had, or support calls that I've attended to over the many years I've been working with Counterpoint and RCS. So I may pull up a customer record, and let's use good old Bill Baker, and I want to see more information. Maybe it's recent sales, just some added data. Okay, so Bill's a avid golfer and shops in the store quite often. But I'm looking at my recent sales and I only see data back only so far. Okay. Or you may do a lot of orders and I may only see a certain amount. Okay. If I want to look at more information, or even if I want to restrict this to only show the last 4 or 5, I can do that in the Zoom dictionary. Okay. And this would be kind of beyond what I can do with the standard tools. So one of the standard tools I can customize here. When I customize, what this is doing is kind of a different layer using the user interface to add or remove fields from the Zoom. Okay, so I may add, again, looking in this top section, I have my primary phone number. You'll notice that's where I changed. I need to apply my new picture mask, right? It's not in here now, so I would export and import in, but there might be some other fields that I want to add to that same screen. Okay, so I double click, I may add birthday and category. I want to move those up on the screen. I go to my recent sales and I want to add more information in here. So maybe cost, if I can view cost, or what was the item category associated, and whatever else I may pull from this area. Now I look at my recent sales and it's different. It's changed around. It shows me different values. I've moved some fields. And now I can save it. So if I save as and just give it a name, test, I can save it and always reload it, or I can save it as a default. So checking the box, save as default. It's now saved. Every time in this type of Zoom I open up, it's going to hold my new settings that I've entered in here. Okay. Let's say I go through and I want to reduce the number of recent sales, or I want to somehow manipulate further than what that screen allows me to do. For those of you, and I see the attendee list, and there are a number on here that I've talked to that dabble in some SQL, but you can go into your Zoom dictionary and manipulate. Okay, so I have this now new ZDef, very similar to data dictionary. I have my system Zoom dictionary and my Zoom dictionary. My Zoom dictionary, everything custom. Okay, this is showing me again in database language, what am I selecting? So whenever I do the Z Zoom, it's adding my customer, my name, contact information, all that I put on there through that user interface in that top section. It's pulling it from my customer table. Okay. And then it's saying, show the customer a number where it's passing a value that the database is sending for selfable. So when I did that Zoom, I was on a record and it's saying just match that record. Then it's pulling in my next section that I see would be sales, right? So I want to look at my sales information and give these fields, but then I want to show just my top 20 sales. For some reason, let's say I want to change that and make it my top 5. Okay. I can do that here. It's going to pull from this view. I do have the option to change that view. So let's say I want to see sales history, but I don't like what this view has. Okay. I can add to it, or I can change the view to some other view in the system. I then set the sequence. How do I want it ordered? Well, I want it to be descending based off of business date, and then document ID inline sequence, and then order it again by that and item number. Okay. So I can always test my SQL. Okay, everything works out. I can save it. And now when I go back into that Zoom dictionary, or in that Zoom in point of sale, I'm going to see a limited list of information. Most people will end up adding more. I'm doing it this way because I don't have many sales for Bill Baker, and I just want to show you what it looks like. All right, so now I had a longer list before. I shrunk it down to just my last 5 sales, and you can see it here. Okay. You could set other conditions in that same filter screen that you can't do through the UI, like exclude certain items, right? So I may want to show recent sales, but certain items I just want to exclude out of there. Don't count those, and that might be if I do shipping and handling as an item. Just don't show that on there. I'm trying to get down to the recent sales. You can also play with this and work and say group it, right? I don't need to see every document that they've purchased. I want to see the recent sales, but group it by item so I can see how many of an item I sold. So in that section, rather than doing a select, I'm going to do a group, and then I'm just going to sum those quantity fields, sum the price field, sum the cost fields, right? And probably put a max on my item category. Everything I'm talking about here, these are, you can do this in just Google, just simple select statements, and that's what's going into the Zoom dictionary. You can get into a lot more in the Zoom dictionary. I can change these actual buttons to be something different. I can add different buttons. I can remove buttons. So if for some reason I want to show this, but you know, I don't need this to pop up and show layaways because I don't use them. Well, in that Zoom dictionary, I could just delete layaways, the layaway section out of it. So back on Zoom dictionary for Z-test here, I may go down to my layaway section and delete it out of the system. Okay. I check my SQL, it looks good. I now have 8 statements, and that's what's going to display there. Okay. If I test this, for some reason it went wrong, I can highlight and delete it. Okay. Any questions? I don't see any other ones popping up in QA. Any challenges that I could maybe possibly try and answer here?
Here we go. Michael wants to know, are we able to receive the Appendix 3 with the shortcut codes?
Yes, absolutely.
We'll attach that with the recording tomorrow.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I always like to hear ideas. Please use this, play with it. I just showed a small sliver of what can be done. Again, if you set something, you can always reverse it in this data dictionary. It's not updating the fields, it's just updating how you interact with the fields. If something pops up and you have a question later or an idea that you want to share, my email address is kalbert@retailcontrolsystems.com. Would love to hear from you. I know some of you have done creative things with the data dictionary. Some of you, we've worked together on those creative things, and many of you, you've gone on and done things that in some cases I didn't know were possible. So please share that out. I'd love to share with the community here.
Kevin, Arlene would like to know, there's some fields that you cannot change. Is there a way to know what you can and cannot change?
Yeah, so where it gets into our a little tricky is when you get into the virtual tables. Okay, so when I look at a standard table, these fields you can change. You can update these fields. You can set different defaults. I could even make, if I'm adding items and for some reason I want to force a tracking method to always be entered, I can default this to null in the system, and it won't set it to the normal gridded, always serialized, sometimes serialized, depending on options you have. That's a good thing, a good way of using it. So by mistake, you don't put a a normal item in that was supposed to be gridded. Okay. I see a question coming up. I would like to default to items to be non-inventory. Yep. So you can default your item type of non-inventory. I believe it's N for non-inventory to be here. So again, in the data dictionary, I'm going to go to my item table. My item type field I would change and set the default value to N. Okay. All right. So anything that's a table on here, you can change these fields. They're going to show up. When you get into these, we call these kind of header line or view tabs. What this is actually showing you when I click on barcodes and I add it on this user interface, it's allowing me to make an entry, but this is actually calling out to the barcodes table. Okay, so IM barcode is the actual table that would be here. If our set required on barcode for this table, it actually sets it on this field here. Okay. So other areas that where it gets tricky on fields that you cannot update. If I go into my data dictionary back here, and it's those where are all the pop-ups. It's approaching 3 o'clock. The virtual tables, that's where it gets a little tricky when I get into the transactional tables. So virtual tables and transactional tables would be like receivings enter, purchase order enter. Some of those fields you can and you can't. It's not completely clear which ones, but if you look at it and I go into, I'll do that example. Interesting. Here, I can't make any adjustments. But when I move into here, anything that looks like these fields here, I can make all of these changes. When I get to lines, this is actually a combination of a receivings header, so a virtual table for the header, and a virtual table for the lines. And some of these here, it's harder. This is actually controlled through different code and not just the data dictionary. So these transactional ones, it's kind of searching and finding. If you do labels as field names, control names, that kind of points you in the right direction too, where if it's not showing that field name or control name, you're not going to change it in this section. Okay. We change pricing to retail, wholesale, and distribution. Not all the tables show the new names. How do we correct this? Great. That's a great question, and that really distinguishes between changes. So the question again was, we made a change to certain fields, the price fields, but it's not showing through the whole system. I gave one example of using quick setup to change a column code, and I kind of breezed past that a little too fast on what else would be in for column codes and a way to get to that. So if I'm looking at, let's say I am item, my regular price field, okay, let's say that what this is really controlled by would be a column code. And I can go to regular price, or let's say my price 1 is retail, price 2 is wholesale, price 3 is distribution. I can find price 1, and instead of changing it on the IM price table and the item table, I would change the column code. So now I would say this is retail, okay, for the column code. And now it's going to change it throughout the system. I think in this case, and in many cases with the column codes, you have to back out and go back in. But let me just show you here. So I changed, as you can see now, this was price 1. I changed the column code, and it's now reflected in my item table and the other tables that this is the actual field name. So I'll go to my price table. And again, here, now it's showing retail here. Okay. So I hope that answered the question. If you need follow-up or if we need to collaborate on that, feel free to reach out to me. All right, all. Well, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it, and I hope you've enjoyed all the learning sessions. We hope to have more and more to come. If you want to share some ideas for learning sessions, we are open. We're here for you, and certainly want to take advantage of some of this time to help you tweak the system and make adjustments that will help your business. So once again, thank you very much. And I have my action items to follow up with some data to share out to you all. Have a great day.